Adam Curran is a wealth advisor for Curran Financial Partners and is also now the author of a paperback book called Retire Y'all, Your Guide to Retiring in South Carolina. I talk one-on-one with Adam for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Adam Curran, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me, Quintin. I'm starstruck. Like I said, I watch all your stuff, and this is such an honor to be with you today.
Thank you greatly, and thank you for watching Quintin's Close-Ups. I know that you are a wealth advisor for Curran Financial Partners, and obviously you're an author of a paperback book that is called Retire Y'all, Your Guide to Retiring in South Carolina. Who is Adam these days?
That's right. It's the first book ever penned about retiring in the state of South Carolina. Therefore, it's the #1 best-selling book of all time. So reach out, get a free copy. We give this thing away for free. It's part of our marketing budget.
Okay, why Retire Y'all? Why now?
Well, because South Carolina is an awesome state. You know, if you can tell by the sound of my voice, I don't have much syrup in it. I don't speak with a drawl. I've only been here in South Carolina for about 11 years, but this place accepted me with open arms. I met my wife here. I'm going to raise my children here with Pluff Mud in their blood. I think this state is absolutely incredible for retirees for qualitative reasons and for quantitative reasons. We have some of the lowest taxes from a property standpoint, low gas tax as well, and just the geography of this place. I mean, you can go to the beach, a couple-hour drive to the mountains. You've got incredible gardens, the best golf in the country. It's just an incredible state. And the book is kind of like a love letter to the state and why I think retirees ought to consider not only living abundant lives here, moving here. I'm kind of trying to get people to stop moving here to a certain degree, though, too. You know, I want to keep it all to ourselves. But that's what the book's about. The book's about what the South Carolinian retiree needs to know to live an abundant retirement here in Palmetto State.
And you said this on your own Amazon, actually. With stunning beaches, world-class golf, rich history, delicious cuisine, and no shortage of Southern hospitality, South Carolina provides an incredible backdrop to live a fulfilled and abundant retirement. It also obviously offers a unique set of challenges, that is. What are those unique challenges in the midst of COVID for retirees?
Well, not even in the midst of COVID, but, you know, there's a little bit of regionalized inflation. As you can tell, there's inflation throughout the whole country, but regionalized. Look at the price of real estate here locally. Wallet Hub did a study a couple years back that said South Carolina has some of the worst health care throughout the whole country. Now, along the coast, our health care is a heck of a lot better than it is inland, but we've got some challenges there as well. Let me think what else is in the book. Just the tax system here in this state could be a little bit confusing, especially if you were a transplant, like if you moved here and you carried a house up in the Northeast or Ohio or something like that, and then you decided to sell your primary and move down here. It could be a little bit complex. It's a progressive income tax system here throughout the state. So a lot of the challenges that retirees face are universal across the whole country, but right here in South Carolina, there are a unique set that just us South Carolinians face.
And I want to talk more about healthcare in depth in just a minute, but let me ask you, how many people retired to South Carolina in 2021?
Man, I knew you were going to ask me that. I think it's 150 people per day are moving here, of which 2/3 of them are over the age of 50. Now, that's data from a couple years ago, right? So that's pre the big COVID migration. And as you know, a lot of young people are coming to Charleston because it's a boom town. And go figure, when those young people make grandbabies, watch how quickly their parents move to Charleston or the Myrtle Beach area. That's what my folks did. My folks live up in Pawleys Island.
Right.
So it was about 150 people per day, 2/3 of which are over the age of 50. So these are all people who are in that retirement wheelhouse.
And where exactly are they heading to?
Oh my God, you tell me. They're all over the place, right? You see the growth. When I moved here 11 years ago, I lived on a dirt road in James Island. There's no more dirt roads in James Island. I go downtown. My wife and I, when we first got married, we lived downtown, and now we go down there to go on a date, and there's skyscrapers everywhere. I don't even recognize the place anymore. If you go up to Somerville, I think it's the Cane Bay area over there. Like every now and again, I'll do a house call. I'll drive up there, and I don't even recognize the place. So there's a ton of growth happening right here in the Charleston area. We have an office up in Myrtle Beach. Our office in Myrtle Beach is just getting inundated with transplant retirees. Also have an office down there in Bluffton. And it's, you've got the Del Webb community there. I mean, the builders can't build the houses quick enough for the transplants moving down our way. So, and then heck, I didn't even name Greenville.
Right.
So just the entire state just has a tremendous amount of people moving here. And Quintin, are you born and raised here in South Carolina?
Exactly right here in Tulsa.
What I'm always taken aback by is folks that are locals. If a bunch of people with Pluff Mud in their blood moved up to Connecticut or New Jersey, I think it might be the Northern aggression, they would take to the streets saying, "Get out of our state." But the folks who are American by birth but Southern by the grace of God, y'all just kind of smile and go, "Come on down." It's the Southern hospitality in y'all, I guess. So I'm always taken aback on how hospitable, and maybe y'all get together in the dark of night and talk when there's no Yankees in the room about get these people out of here. But I'm always just taken aback on how, heck, when I started my business, I thought the only people who were going to hire me were going to be Yankee transplants. I went my first entire year getting hired by nothing but native Charlestonians, native South Carolinians, putting a little trust in me when there wasn't all that much to trust at that season of my career.
And how does your company, Curran Financial Partners, continue to keep up with that growth?
That's the biggest challenge. I think all the small business owners that you talk to, it's growing, but it's growing right. There's a saying, you don't want to let your motorboat mouth steer your tugboat butt. We do a lot of talk radio, and we're on TV, and we get lots of people to raise their hand and call us up. But it's important that the quality of the planning that we provide here continues to stay at a rung or two above mediocre. So finding talented people, finding smart, energetic, ethical people has never been more difficult, but we've got a lot of irons in the fire, and we've been blessed, and we're lucky to have found a bunch of really good people. But it's a never-ending process as a small business owner, constantly recruiting. So if anyone's watching this right now and you want to have a career in wealth management, reach out to our company. We are always hiring.
Absolutely. And how many small businesses have been created with these new people coming into the state of South Carolina?
Oh my gosh, you're getting analytical with me. I don't know, but I know the labor market couldn't be more difficult. We've got all these people moving here, and they're building just literally as the crow flies from my office. There's 5 different condominium apartment complex getting built, and my wife and I drive by and go, "Who's moving there? And why aren't any of them coming to work for us?" There's so many individuals moving down this way, and most of which are kind of, Charleston proper is kind of a place for yuppies, younger people. It's Somerville, it's the Myrtle Beach, Grand Strand area where you're finding the larger groups of, baby boomers and retirees. So I don't know the numbers on that. You got to go talk to the South Carolina Bureau for Small Business or something, but I'm sure they're astronomical.
Wow. And I know in your latest book, Retire Y'all, your guide to retiring in South Carolina, you obviously shoot straight on all matters retirement, changing tax law, market conditions, investment strategy, real estate, healthcare, and more. What new tax laws in the state are on your radar right now?
Gosh, so a lot of what Biden was planning in his Build Back Better agenda, as far as taxes are concerned, are pretty much dead on arrival. If you remember that infrastructure package, he split it into 2 chunks, one of which was, bridges and roads, real infrastructure. And the other chunk of it was more human infrastructure, soft infrastructure. Well, the bridges and the road stuff got done. It would be very rare for a administration to pass sweeping tax legislation in a midterm year. So my guess is we're going to continue to have Trump's tax reform, or the Jobs Act, I think is what it was called. We're going to continue to have his tax reform, and I believe it sunsets at the end of 2024, which would be the end of Biden's presidency. Then, depending on what happens in the midterms, depending on what happens next presidential cycle, Trump's tax reform completely goes away, right? So the standardized deduction, most people are now taking a standardized deduction rather than itemizing because it's gotten so high. That goes away. The estate tax right now is not on many people's radar because you could pass darn near $20 million on to your kids without any taxation. That might drop down to say $1 million. There's a lot of scary talk about eliminating the step up in basis. That's back on the table. But I think we can all breathe. Well, if you've got a lot of money and you're worried about taxation, we can all somewhat breathe a sigh of relief that some of the more egregious taxation ideas that were floating around in 2021, that stuff is probably not going to hit us. We're going to live with our current tax code, at least through the primaries, or at least through the midterms. Now, after the midterms, if there's a lot of people are anticipating a red wave just because what's going on, with the economy and inflation and COVID and now Ukraine and what have you. If that's a blue wave and there's some political momentum for the Democrats, all that tax stuff gets put back on the plate.
Now, speaking of deductions, what higher standard deductions will the average retiree see on their 2022 federal income taxes?
Like $27,000, right? So one of the things that we talk to people about, gone are the days for most retirees where they need to save their giving statements and their mortgage interest deduction and their state and local tax SALT taxes.
Right.
We used to the pursuit of filling out your tax returns used to be you have to keep a spreadsheet and pull all your receipts. Well, nowadays most retirees with a standardized deduction of $27,000, they don't have to tally up their mortgage interest or their state and local taxes or their charitable giving because those numbers are not eclipsing that $27,000 number. Which it also breaks your heart a little bit too because people give to churches and charities because they want to give to that cause. However, it's awfully helpful that people get a tax deduction when they give to it. So one of the things, I don't know if we talk about it in the book, but we talk a lot about what are called donor advised funds. It's a way in which people can get charitable deductions again for giving to churches and charities. There's a whole chapter in the book on taxation that I think retirees need to fix their eye on in order. It's funny, the people I work with, Quintin, are 60, 70 years old, meaning they've been scrubbing a tax return for 40 years. But a lot of times when they sit down at our planning table and we discuss the most basic of tax concepts, like how the brackets work, how if you get bumped into a higher bracket, all of your money doesn't get taxed at that higher bracket, just a little sliver that goes up there. When we talk about taking a standardized deduction or an itemized deduction and above the line deductions and tax credits, people are always mesmerized. I think a lot of financial advisors are more in the business of just showing people a pie chart, telling them to put this much in stocks and this much in bonds. We really pride ourselves on our understanding of tax code as well as insurance.
Now, how many of those people, when you talk about those charitable givings, how much was that in 2021 for those retirees?
So in 2021, your charitable giving, there is no limit on it, right? Mm-hmm. However, if you're not giving more than that $27,000 number, you're not getting a tax deduction for it. So we do a little podcast too. We don't have nearly as many listeners as you. Oh. You're the superstar here in Charleston. But I've talked to a lot of the charitable organization leaders. And what I've found is a lot of these charities now, they recognize that they actually have to be in the business of disseminating tax advice because people are no longer writing off their charitable giving. So you almost have to educate people about, hey, did you know you can give money directly from your IRA if you're over the age of 72 and do a qualified charitable distribution? Did you know you can set up a donor advised fund? So it all comes down to just educating people, teaching people the optimal way to give to children, churches, and charities. And what I think these charitable organizations are doing now is they're recognizing that they need to step in and put their their teacher's hat on and teach people how to do it the right way.
Now, what was that donor advised fund like in 2020, for instance?
Well, it was 2020. We had Trump's tax reform as well, right? But prior to that, they certainly weren't nearly as attractive because most everyone was itemizing, right? I think I saw now. I think I saw it's 80% of individuals now take a standardized deduction, right? So prior to that, it was probably flipped. 80% of people were taking an itemized deduction. So now that everyone's taking a standardized deduction, the donor advised fund is getting a little time in the light because people recognize, hey, if I'm giving to charity, I know I'm going to give this to my church. I might as well get some sort of economic benefit for doing it. That's not why I'm giving to my church, but if I'm going to give to the church, I might as well get some sort of economic benefit. So something you ought to look into if you're giving.
Now, this might be a redundant question here, Adam, but what special charitable deduction will be non-existent in 2022?
It'll be the same. Like I said, Quintin, I don't think the tax law is going to change in 2022. We were worried, like literally as of December 31st of last year, we were like, okay, is something going to get passed in the dark of night? Because, politicians, they love to pass things at like midnight, the day before the deadline. But it didn't happen. I think it would be very rare for them to pass any major tax legislation in 2022 because of, the midterms, right? No one wants to go, if there's anything we can count on our politicians to do, Quintin, and you've interviewed all of them, it's whatever it takes to get reelected. So whether you are a bleeding heart liberal who believes we need to distribute the wealth, or you're a staunch conservative who says don't tread on me, taxation is theft, both of those people are politicians at their core, and they want votes. And the bottom line is when you raise people's taxes, they're a little less apt and prone to vote for you. So I don't think we're going to see any tax changes here in 2022.
What would a person, Adam, increase their retirement income, say up to 24% by reducing the tax liability?
Yeah, so that's a big loaded question. I love that one though. So what I find is retirees are making business decisions, financial decisions, retirement decisions based off of feelings, right? Or something their golfing buddy said, or God forbid they picked up a Forbes magazine. I picked up this magazine the other day, retirement guide. It cost me $14. $14, if you can believe that. So
Right.
My first piece of financial advice, don't buy magazines for $14. But what I find is people are making decisions based off of feelings and they're not doing math, right? And typically when the average retiree comes and sits down at our planning table, we don't just sell investments, right? We're gaming out mathematically the optimal way for them to elect their Social Security. We're looking at their nest egg. We're determining a reasonable drawdown rate, how much we can take out of their portfolio on a month-by-month basis. We're compensating for all of the what ifs, because that's what's happening. The reason people are making their decisions based off of feelings, because naturally 80% of news headlines are negative in nature. That's what I love about your stuff. You're positive, you're interviewing people, you're having conversations, you're not just scaring people. Right. So it's only natural for retirees who've been putting money in a piggy bank for 40 years. Then all of a sudden someone rings a bell and goes, hey, you're old now, time to smash the piggy bank and spend the money. People grab the money. They're terrified about utilizing the money to create incredible experiences with their family. So if you look at that decision mathematically and you determine this is how much rate of return I need to make on my money, this is how much money I can pull out, this is how taxation is going to affect me, therefore I should pull this much out of an IRA, I should pull this much out of my Roth, I should pull this much out of my non-qualified account. Many times when people go through this process with us, it comes to light, people can be retiring a heck of a lot sooner than they ever thought possible, and usually generating more monthly income that they could spend to create experiences. People will regularly say to me, like, what's the biggest concern for retirees? And if you watch network television, you would think it's running out of money, right? Like, oh, you're going to run out of money. You're going to have to eat cat food and welcome people to Walmart because you're going to deplete all your assets. I would argue most people that we help, the biggest concern that I have for them is not running out of money. It's they're going to wind up being the wealthiest people in the cemetery because they're pecking at their money like chickens because of insert financial fear here. Inflation, crazy geopolitical stuff now over in Ukraine. The stock market's going to crash. Oil's going to go up. What if my wife gets sick? What if I predecease my spouse? All of this financial clutter and fear is clouding people's judgment, to make mathematical decisions. And retirement planning, no doubt, there's qualitative elements to it. Where are you going to live? What's your relationship going to be with your grandkids? All of that's important. But at the end of the day, the decision to retire, when you can retire, how much you can spend, the optimal amount of money to draw from your accounts, taxation, that's all mathematical. And when we plan with people, we mathematically walk them through all those calculations in a way to give them a little more peace of mind. And we helped, I think last year, I think it was 250 people put their 2 weeks in retire. Wow. And I can tell you, every one of those people, there's still a trust fall that happens there. Like, okay, am I going to be okay? And then 1 year passes, and they go, holy cow, that was a year? I'm busier now in retirement than what I was while I was working. How did I get it all done?
Yes.
And they feel a little better. And then another year passes, and then another year passes. The next thing you know, you're retired for 3 years, 5 years, and go, oh my gosh, I like this retirement thing. So it's a terrifying proposition. It's a leap of faith, but a good planner should be mathematically crunching these numbers. And what I find in my industry, not to poo-poo my entire industry, there are some great financial advisors here in South Carolina, but what I find in my industry, oftentimes people are getting their advice from someone at a dinner presentation trying to sell a financial account or an annuity or something like that, or they're getting their financial advice from someone with a bull on their business card where, go figure, you want all the money to go into the market. There's a lot of financial salesmanship in my industry, and I think what retirees need is math, right? Figures don't lie, liars sure can figure. Sometimes the mathematics that Wall Street likes to use is in the name of selling more products. But what people need to do is, any good investment should be explainable with a crayon, and people should have a better understanding of how their money's invested, why it's invested in the way in which it's invested, and have a mathematical, living, breathing measuring stick that they could use for the rest of their life.
Now, well, that brings me to my next question. How exactly do you efficiently structure that income from 3 different retirement plans?
Well, I think I know what you're getting at there. And what I tell people is, a lot of times, if you get a retirement plan put together by a robo-advisor, for instance, or so you punch your information into a calculator and it spits out a number for you. One of the major things that's missing is when you're in your 60s and in your 70s,
right,
if you have your health and you have your energy, I believe you should give yourself permission to spend more money when you're in your 60s and your 70s, knowing darn well that when you're in your 80s and in your 90s, you're probably going to be front porch sitting yelling at the squirrels for eating your birdseed, or yelling at the kids for throwing a ball in your front yard. Like, we have less thirst and energy to travel the world. Like, I'm an old soul at heart. I live over on Daniel Island. If it were up to me, I would never leave my little island. I would never cross a bridge. So I don't know what I'm going to be like when I'm 90 years old. It's going to be my wife's going to have to deal with me. So what I believe is, if you're in your 60s, you're in your 70s, give yourself permission to spend more money, knowing darn well you're not going to be spending as much in your 80s and your 90s, with exception to healthcare. But we can address healthcare with different mechanisms throughout the plan.
Now, okay, what do those who receive Social Security disability payments have to pay attention to right now?
Not a whole lot, other than the fact that you're going to get a big COLA adjustment here in 2022. I think the COLA adjustment's like 6% or something like that. So you're all going to get a raise. However, if you're on Medicare, they raise Medicare Part B premiums. So they kind of paid Peter and robbed Paul there. But no, the biggest thing that you need to be conscious of with Social Security is just that you're going to get a COLA adjustment. Seems to be trending to get another big COLA adjustment. Granted, we're only 2 years into or 2 months into the year here in 2022, but it seems like. But here's the problem with that, Quintin. If we use the same calculation that we used in the early 80s to calculate COLA adjustments on your Social Security and your Social Security disability payments, you would have gotten like a 15% pay raise in 2022, right? But you got a 6% pay raise. That's because the government has kind of watered down the CPI equation. It's now called chained urban linked CPI. So it's just basically a way in which the government can cannot truly recognize. They booted out all the automobiles and oil and gas and things like that. And my goodness, I went to the grocery store yesterday, and I'm at a point in my life where I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn. So I don't really have the luxury to look at prices when I go to the grocery store. I just put crap in the cart.
Yes.
I read menus left to right, not right to left nowadays. I'm lucky for that. Lord knows I read menus right to left for 20 years. But gosh, have you gone to the grocery store lately? I'm putting stuff and crying as I put it in the, geez, what's happening? Filling up my gas tank. Yeah. So I don't know if Social Security SSDI benefits are going to keep pace with real inflation. That answers your question.
Now, how do you actually calculate the Social Security benefits taxable amounts?
Well, for most people, I shouldn't say for most people. Yeah, so FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of course, when he unrolled the Social Security program, he did it at his famous fireside speech, right? And some smart aleck in the front of the room said, Mr. President, will you ever tax this wonderful benefit that you're providing? And he said, son, as long as I live, your Social Security benefits will never be taxed. And what happened to FDR? He died. So there has since been a bunch of legislation, I think of like the Omnibus Reconciliation Act in 1985, I think was the big one, where now if you have MAGI, you're a married couple and you have MAGI over $44,000, 85% of your Social Security gets run through the tax grid. So I will say for retirees, Social Security income is not taxed in South Carolina. That's a good thing. Social Security income is a more tax-sensitive income source than a distribution from IRA, or it's a more tax-sensitive income source than income you pull from a job, but it certainly does get taxed. Here again, that needs to be calculated into your plan.
Now, will someone's estate not be taxed by the federal government?
Right about now, it won't. I tell you, if you got a lot of money and you're on death's doorstep, might be a good time to die. I'm kidding. But the estate tax is really high right now. I think when Obama was elected, a lot of people thought he was going to lower the estate tax to about $1 million. People were astonished that he actually raised it. Then Trump raised it again. And then, of course, Joe Biden wasn't able to get his tax agenda passed. So it remains at the same level it was with Trump. So literally, like I said earlier, you can die with $20 million and not pay a nickel in taxes. But what a lot of people anticipate, because who's the easiest person to tax? People will go, they'll think through that. A dead person, right? They don't argue. Family members are usually fighting or grieving, or a combination of one of two things. People don't lose their mother multiple times, so it's a once in a lifetime type situation. So you don't really understand how tax code works. So I fully anticipate, I think the crosshairs of the IRS, which is an acronym for I rob seniors, is on baby boomers right now. And I think the easiest way to tax these baby boomers is through what's called wealth transfer, which is a fancy way of taxing dead people. So I think the estate tax will come down. I think that they're trying to tax your IRA more aggressively. You used to be able to stretch your IRA out over the course of 120 years. Now they want you to distribute your IRA in the course of 10 years. So if you hear the word wealth transfer, just know that's politicians using very shrewd language to say tax dead people.
This might be a silly question, Adam. At what age do you stop paying taxes or even filing a tax return?
Never. I just did. My wife's grandmother is 98 years young. I did her tax return yesterday at this very computer. And all she has is a Social Security payment and a little tiny pension from AT&T. So you still got to file your taxes. Now, she doesn't owe any money, right? So her standardized deduction is bigger than her income, but you still got to file a tax return. I think there's some threshold. If you make under a certain, you don't have to do a tax return. I think it's like $7,000, but don't hold me to that. I'm not an accountant.
Sure. Okay. How do you protect your retirement money from the market of mortality?
How do you protect your retirement money? Okay. So there's a multitude of different financial instruments out there. I'll answer that in a more kind of a big picture way.
Sure.
I think when you hit retirement, losses hurt you a heck of a lot more than gains help you, right? When you're our age, I'm thinking you're around the same age as me. The name of the game is just buy low cost Vanguard index funds and hang on for dear life, right? But when you're 60 years old, and if you make an extra 5 or 6% on your money, chances are you're not buying a bigger house or more plastic crap or toys. But if you lose 10, 20%, because that's what your ultimately the bargain is, in order to make that extra 5, 6%, you're taking on a level of risk that can lend itself to you losing an extra 10 or 15%. So if you lose 10, 15%, that might cause you to have to work another year. That might cause you to have to live off of a little bit less of your portfolio, or you might just lose sleep, right? You might be looking at the stock market. I find the retirees that I work with who live the most abundant lives are not the people logging into Yahoo Finance and logging into their accounts 3 times a day, mincing and dissecting their investments. Now, some people just enjoy that. Like, I'm a nerd. I like looking at my investments and looking at the PE ratio and the yield on my dividend stocks. But what I find are the people who I believe have the highest financial IQ recognize that money is not their identity. Money is simply a tool, and you utilize that tool to live as worry-free and as abundant a life as humanly possible. So another thing that we say around here all the time is, I want people who work with us to have really boring investment plans so they can live exciting lives. I don't want them to have exciting investments so they could panic when Russia, attacks Ukraine and the market drops 15%. So they have boring lives. Boring investment plans, exciting lives. So you can do that. The other challenge that people get is sometimes they'll work with someone who only has a license to sell XYZ products, right? Or they'll work with a guy who works for a company that's beholden to a certain set of financial instruments, right? So it's important that people work with independent financial advice givers, work with fiduciaries, people who truly have their best interest in heart.
Yeah. And speaking of living, and obviously you mentioned homes, how could you actually sell your home to fund your retirement?
Ooh, okay. That's a good one. Well, you can't swing a dead cat in Charleston without bumping into a real estate agent. So, excuse my language, man. I know this is not the we're a little politically incorrect over here. But, I don't look at a home. I just did an interview with this magazine that talked about millennials in particular. There's this like movement where it's like, oh, buying a home is a dumb financial move. Like, buying a home is the bedrock of financial stability. Like, when you own a home, your shelter becomes inflation proof, right? Because the mortgage isn't going to rise on you. Whereas if you're renting, your rent could go up. Right. It's a forced savings program. So a portion of your payment goes towards principal, a portion of it goes towards interest. You could do capital improvement projects that benefit your life. So I don't look at it as your residence as a financial mechanism to be utilized within your financial plan. However, remember we talked about 85-year-olds and 90-year-olds? Right. If you're 80 years old, do you really need to live in a 4,000 square foot home? Probably not, right? So you might downsize. You might pull some equity out of that house and utilize it as part of your investment plan. But again, that's a qualitative decision, not a quantitative. My goal in the planning with the people we work with, most people don't want to have to leave their house, right? Most people want to get taken out of their house in a box. So when we plan with people, we want to assume they live in that house for the rest of their life. We never want to assume they have to downsize. We never want to assume they have to do a reverse mortgage or something like that, which we don't advise people to do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and you know what? In what way can a rental property generate retirement income for some people?
Rental properties are incredible. I think there's no asset class quite as lucrative as real estate. And I know I shouldn't say that because I don't sell real estate, but real estate is we got a whole chapter in the book on real estate because real estate is such a great asset class. It's a great tax sensitive income source as well. I think one thing that people get into trouble with real estate, though, is you got to have the right temperament. I think Robert Kiyosaki, the who wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is all about investing in real estate, he says if you don't have the temperament to evict a family of four for not paying their rent to you, you shouldn't own real estate. And I don't know about you, but me, I don't have the right temperament for real estate, because if someone were to come to me and say, "Hey, I lost my job and my relative died," I'd be like, "Don't worry about it. I'm too easygoing."
Right, right.
And the other thing is this: I find a lot of people who own real estate,
Yes.
whether they know it or not, they're in the low income housing business. Like, they're renting their properties for prices that are way below market. Now, if you've got a tenant that you know and you like and you trust is going to keep paying, by all means, you can keep doing that. But you got to recognize that owning real estate is a business decision. So in the book, what we talk about is calculating the yield on your rental property, right? And if that's not yielding over 7%, so you look at the value of the property and you're looking at your annual rental income, right? Just gross. Don't net out the property manager. Don't net out taxes. Just look at the gross number. If that's not 7% or more from a gross yield perspective, it's not a good rental property. The other thing that I think people get in trouble with here, Quintin, is they get rentals on the beach, right?
Yes.
So they walk into a little beach property and they see their family in it and they go, "Oh man, we can come and vacation here." But the modern day renter is beating the heck out of your property. You're going to have down seasons where you're not renting it in the winter. So there's going to be a lot of capital improvement that needs to happen. There's going to be a lot of down months. So I don't personally, now I know there's probably some real estate agents that would probably mince my words here, and I find the people who do the best with rental properties are not buying the beach rentals unless they want to use it. But here again, this is not investment. This is just qualitative. The people who do the best with rental income are the people who are buying these little 3 and 2 ranches that were built in the 1960s, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and finding a good family to rent it. Heck, I even see people who do really well with Section 8 rentals. The problem with real estate, any real estate agent will tell you this, is it's an emotional asset, right? When you look at the property, you see yourself in it. When you find a tenant, you grow endeared to them to a certain degree. So you got to have the right mindset to separate yourself from your emotions to have a successful relationship with real estate, I find.
Adam, in what way do you actually can somebody like a retiree generate money from a rental property for retirement, for the retirement income, I should say?
Yeah, like I said, you got to have the right emotional temperament to be in real estate. But some people, like, they don't have the temperament to be in stocks and mutual funds. They want to own real estate instead. And then some people look at me and go, "Adam, don't lose me a penny. And if you lose me a nickel, I'm a proud NRA member and I'll find you." Put their money in safe things, real boring investments. So a lot of it has to do with, I think sometimes people just believe, hey, this is the modern portfolio theory that you're taught about in college, and this is how it's got to be. If you're 70 years old, you should have a 70-30 blend of stocks and bonds, and real estate, you should be leveraged to the hilt, and it's okay to have a mortgage because it's a tax deduction. And the fact of the matter is, as human beings, we're all magnificently flawed. We all have different things that make us tick, different things that keep us up at night. So it really depends on the individual that you're sitting with. And I think that's what makes a good advice giver, just recognizing that not everyone's going to march in lockstep with each other. People need to own investments and financial instruments and real estate that's going to help them sleep well at night, regardless of what happened, or regardless of what God or the economy throws at them.
And what are those other boring investments that you hear about right now?
Oh my gosh, man, you're asking. I could go into a whole. How much time do you have? Obviously, the easy ones, they're not really investments, but just sitting on God's cash is an asset. I mean, we're learning right now that cash is an asset, even though inflation's rearing its ugly head. But when the market drops 15%, sometimes it's nice to have some dry powder to go bargain shopping. And I think there's some bargains to be had right now. CDs, bonds. We're not a big fan of bonds. We talk a lot about fixed and linked accounts, market linked CDs. These are FDIC insured certificates of deposit that grow based on the market. So if the stock market goes up, you can participate in a portion of the market's upside. Fixed indexed annuities, the dreaded A word. People hate the A word for good reason because most of them are bad. But you could get an account that's fixed, meaning if the market crashes, your principal's safe. But if the market goes up, you participate in a portion of the market's upside. TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, I bonds. These are government bonds that pay an additional interest payment based on inflation. So here again, it's important to work with people who recognize the entire landscape of all the investments that exist and fit them into a plan, a bigger picture plan that looks at their life very mathematically and gives them permission to spend their money.
And speaking of which, how do you then budget medical expenses into the retirement?
Yeah, it certainly becomes very challenging when people try to retire under the age of 65, right? Because, of course, Medicare doesn't kick in until you're 65. Luckily, there's a bunch of options that individuals have. They can go to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. That's a subsidized-based program. So if we're able to keep your income under a certain threshold, many times we're helping people who have millions of dollars get free health insurance, which kind of grinds my gears a little bit. As someone who has a family of 5, it would cost me $2,500 to get health insurance through Obamacare, but we're helping millionaires get free health insurance by manipulating how their income hits their 1040. My wife and I personally use one of these Christian cost-sharing ministries. We use a group called Liberty Health Share, MediShare. That could be a way. A lot of individuals who work in my company use short-term health insurance. Once you hit 65, though, Medicare kicks in, and then it becomes a very easy equation. You have your Medicare Part B premiums, which could increase if your income goes high, and then you also have a little gap, right? Because Medicare covers about 80% of your expenses, and that little 20% gap, usually people will plug it with either a Medicare Advantage program or a supplement. Now, Medicare and supplements and Advantage only cover about 150 days. Anything beyond 150 days falls into what's called long-term care. The number one cause of bankruptcy for retirees is getting sick. And it's not typically because they had a heart attack or a stroke or need a knee replacement. It's typically because if it's a long-term debilitating illness. Long-term care, the way to solve that equation used to be 2 options. One, you could buy long-term care insurance, which is a total ripoff. It would cost a couple, probably $500 a month to protect themselves for something that they hope they never need to use. Or you do what's called self-insure. Self-insuring just simply means you fork over money every single month, and the risk you run there is you blow through all your money and you find yourself on Medicaid. You do what's called a Medicaid spend down. There's an account in the middle of long-term care insurance and self-insuring that we talk about in the book, and it's called a qualified healthcare rider. And it functions very, very similar like an HSA, a health savings account. What people like about health savings accounts is you put money into an account and they're very flexible, right? One of 3 things happens to all of us in life. 1, we might just meet our maker in a recliner after a big meal. If that happens, all of the money you put in that program goes to your heirs. 2, you might put money into one of these programs and then go, hey, I want to go move to Costa Rica, or I'm going to go live in Mexico and get treated like a king or a queen for 1/3 of the price. You always have the ability to take your money and go elsewhere with it. Lastly, if you can't do 2 of your 6 activities of daily living, if you qualify for long-term care, either at home or confinement, a feature of the account kicks in and it'll increase your account's income, or it'll increase your account's purchasing power to help pay for the added cost of long-term care. So there used to be 2 of these accounts. Now there's like 60. Usually when someone says financial innovation, it's kind of like, the financial people are innovating. And usually that innovation lends itself to the financial people getting rich and a bunch of consumers left in their wake, losing money. But this has been financial innovation that I think is beneficial for people to recognize how these accounts work, and they could be of benefit. I know they're of benefit to a lot of the retirees we help.
Now, how much has Medicaid premiums risen by in the past 2 years?
I forget the exact number. I think it's up by like $12. It's okay. Up to Medicare Part B premiums are $145 a month now, and that gets taken right out of your Social Security. Medicare supplement plans, that's something that you need to constantly shop. Whether you have a Medicare, you have a Part F plan through XYZ company or ABC company, it offers the same darn benefits. So it's important for people to constantly shop your insurance, just like your homeowner's insurance, just like your auto insurance.
Right.
It's beneficial periodically to just reshop that.
Yes, sir. And, I have the mobile hotspot issues right now, and I want to get you back this summer to talk more about this. Well, how do you create money to have a meaningful experience?
Oh my gosh, just do math, right? Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Mathematically lay out your financial life and give yourself permission to spend money, and work with planners, right? So when we mathematically lay out someone's financial life and we illustrate that, hey, you ought to be pulling $4,000 or $5,000 a month out of your investments. People go like, what would I do with it, right? And my response is, just let it hit your bank account. And it doesn't mean you need to spend it. Heck, it can just build up in the bank account, and then at the end of the year, you can give it back to us. But let it hit your bank account. Live in a world of surplus. Live in a world of abundance. Don't peck at your money like a chicken.